Yo, so I know everyone and their grandma is talking about Palworld, but I figured the world is desperate for a random guy sitting in his room wearing a Kirby shirt to give his perspective. Ultimately, I'm gonna solve this whole drama right here on the spot in this video, right here, right now. You're seeing it live, kind of, and yeah, everyone's gonna finally shut the fuck up. Let's get into it. Plagiarism and AI. There's plenty of videos on this topic, and frankly, it should be well known at this point that there is no evidence to suggest the use of AI, so I'm not even going to entertain that discussion. So plagiarism. First of all, here is the definition. Plagiarism is the practice of taking someone else's work or ideas and passing them off as one's own. So, how would this pertain to Palworld? Well, in the case of Palworld, people are claiming that the design of their characters are direct copies of Pokemon's characters. And I think it's fair to say that they're quite similar, absolutely. But to say they're direct copies is a bit of a stretch. To be completely upfront, my initial perspective on this matter is that Palworld's character designs are not plagiarism. Obviously, these pals drew heavily from Pokemon, and why wouldn't they? Now, obviously, I don't know what the developers were thinking, but I think it's pretty clear that the market they were going after are Pokemon fans, and that's okay. It's okay to find a gap in a market and try to take that. I don't see that as an inherently bad thing to do. Of course, there are people with more obligations, and that leads me to my next thing, which in a little bit I'm going to tackle. One of the biggest things I want to talk about in this video is the passion and profit paradigm. But since plagiarism is the trending topic, I do want to share a little more on that perspective here first. So people who claim Palworld is committing plagiarism are taking bullets for Nintendo and Game Freak, which I find very odd considering these are the very same people who have been fervently speaking out against Nintendo and Game Freak in recent years. For a while now, it has been a fairly well-known consensus among the Pokemon community that there's massive disappointment in Nintendo's recent Pokemon titles such as Scarlet and Violet. And really in the Pokemon franchise in general, what they've conveyed in the last few years is a complete lack of care and effort. Delivering half-baked games with graphics and animations that are outdated, worlds that feel empty and lifeless, and just mechanics that aren't very engaging. When in contrast, we have Palworld, whose development team, Pocket Pair, only had about $50,000 or so to put into Palworld, and claims they all pretty much had to learn game development on the fly. That's wild. Again, I know not obviously everyone likes Palworld, but I mean, there's no denying their absolutely stellar success. The numbers show. I don't care what you think, you have to be able to see how insane that is. A multi-billion-dollar company with decades of information about what you want and all the resources to use to build that, and a small company was able to pull a massive portion of the Pokemon market and fan base over to them. Even though they didn't have to do anything unique, they're just like, we're gonna take something that's working, but then deliver something that you keep fucking up on. You keep holding out and not giving your audience what they want. And even though I'm not saying Palworld gave every single thing that Pokemon fans wanted, obviously that's not the case. Which, by the way, brings me to my next point. Palworld was not a secret. Unless Nintendo was asleep at the wheel for the last 3 years, they had plenty of time to assess the designs of Palworld and call it plagiarism and not allow them to release the game. We know Nintendo is notorious for taking legal action, even on small creators you've never even heard of, who have 1 subscriber, which maybe is a bit extreme, but I think we all know that Nintendo's not afraid to take legal action. They would take legal action on themselves if they could. By the way, Nintendo, did you see Tears of the Kingdom? I think that was an exact copy of Breath of the Wild, just saying. But I digress. This for me really is the nail in the coffin for the whole plagiarism topic. On a personal opinion, I think we should just all shut the fuck up and stop worrying about it and let Nintendo decide. Why are we wasting our time with it? Like, either they decide it's plagiarism or they don't, right? But in terms of proving that it's not plagiarism, I think a very valid piece of evidence is that Nintendo hasn't taken action in 3 years. Why would they suddenly do it now? Well, because Palworld is seeing massive success, and everyone and their freaking grandma is comparing it to Pokemon. for understandable reasons. So what is the point of arguing about plagiarism? You clearly have a reason for hating Palworld that goes beyond plagiarism. And this is where I realized what the core issue of all this drama comes from. This brings us to the passion versus profit paradigm. Many people value passion over profit, and many of those people view the prioritization of profit as inherently evil, or bad practice at the very least. And I think if we remove all the people who complain for no reason, hard to do, what we see is that the people who are genuinely upset are creatives themselves, who are watching Palworld see massive success by basically copying someone's homework in their mind, right? And honestly, I can understand and empathize with that. I feel this is the most rational and credible point to the other side. It must feel extremely disheartening and discouraging, frankly, to think that all the passion and creativity that you put into your own project, whatever that may be, that it may not be profitable because you're not, copying other things. Because you see projects like Palworld who ultimately in your mind are putting in no effort, right? They're just copying everything, no effort, no creativity, and yet they are making a ton of money. It makes you feel like, why should you try, and why would anyone else want to try, right? It's just going to create this perpetual loop of people copying each other. Creativity is going to get thrown out the door, and things like the gaming space are going to lose a lot of their passion. And that's a very fair thing to be concerned about, but I don't think it makes it fair to look down at people for valuing profit before passion. It is not inherently evil to value money. It is objectively a helpful tool, and tools are not inherently evil. I also want to make it clear that I don't understand putting people down for not being 100% original. Some of the best creative ideas, whether they're successful or not, come from standing on the shoulders of giants. Do I encourage and hope to see more originality from Pocket Pair? Absolutely. But if we are to assume their designs are not plagiarism, then the only argument left is that they are buying assets and incentivizing future development teams to take the easy route, thus harming the gaming space because no one tries to be original. It's a very fair point. But I have bad news. Well, kind of good news at the same time. Palworld's success isn't going to change anything. People who want to take the easy route will continue to do so, and people who want to be passionate will continue to be passionate. Genuinely, I don't know if I'm wrong on this, but it seems like most games that take the easy route don't find much success or profit. That's why games like Baldur's Gate 3 is Game of the Year, and games like The Day Before fell off the face of the earth. That's also why games like Dark and Darker, who also use a ton of purchase assets, have seen great success. They're open about it, and but they still care about their game. And granted, I would agree that Palworld is a bit more of a mixing pot of games. We can clearly see Ark, Pokémon, and Zelda-inspired aspects, whereas Dark and Darker feels a bit more original, at least in terms of design, but certainly they're building on extraction and battle royale concepts. So is that plagiarism? No. I think honestly that one of the biggest issues with Palworld is that the claim of plagiarism is coming from a visual aspect. It's funny because there's so many games that straight up copy concepts or mechanics, things that are underlying, right? It's part of something you don't see when you're playing the game. You may be experiencing it, or it may be even a core part of the game, but you're not actively seeing it. And I think that's one of the biggest issues with Palworld, is that it's a visual thing. Because again, let's be real, Pokemon was very much inspired mechanically, or conceptually rather, by Dragon Quest and Digimon. It is a monster collecting game, and it came after Dragon Quest and Digimon, both monster collecting games. And yet we don't talk about that because it's just a mechanic, right? You can just forget about that. But when something is visual, we can't let it go. And that is an interesting point, actually. Hello, it is me from the future, and real quick, I wanted to recommend this video that I actually just found today. It's from a channel called Nintendo Unity, and it compares a bunch of Pokemon characters with monsters in Dragon Quest, and I am blown away. I had no clue that the designs of Pokemon characters were so similar to Dragon Quest. I was under the impression that Pokemon just took the monster collecting idea from Dragon Quest, but it turns out a lot of the Pokemon designs look just like Dragon Quest monsters. So please go watch it, especially if you're somebody that views Palworld characters as plagiarism. It is a perfect example to show that even your beloved franchise Pokemon is still just comprised of humans who are artists and took inspiration from other projects, and that's okay. It is not inherently bad. And it's honestly just like Palworld vs. Pokemon, where majority of the Pokemon shown still stand on their own, even though you can find the counterpart in Dragon Quest. But there are some that are like, yeah, that's a little too close for comfort. Exactly the same as Palworld and Pokemon. If you can't see that is exactly the same, then honestly there was never going to be a discussion, and you're just looking for reasons to hate Palworld, so yeah. And if it's any condolences, I do hope that Palworld motivates Nintendo and Game Freak to think a little bit more about their community. I hope the best for you, truly. To the people who hate Palworld, I hope that you get the best. Like, I hope you get everything you want from Pokemon. Like, you deserve it. Nintendo has fucked you over for far too long, and I'm sick of seeing companies take advantage of passionate gamers who have given them time and time again plenty of information and patience, and they just continue to show complete disregard. So please let us stop fighting, and also everyone shut the fuck up. Thank you and good night.